So hi, everyone. Welcome to the ACL Year-Round Mentorship. And today's section, we will talk about how to do literature review. And very luckily, we have on the session, Wei from Georgia Tech, Shane from University of Washington, me from Max Planck Institute at ETH, and Oana from University of Michigan. So maybe each of us will go through some suggestions on how we do our literature review and then where do we stop. So maybe we, let's say by default, we could go through alphabetical order by the name. So we'll have Shane first.
Okay. Should I share this like couple of slides that Wei and I made, or?
That would be great. Yes.
Okay, let me find them. And I guess I didn't say much explicitly about when to stop, but I do have thoughts about that. So. Okay. Are they visible?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, and then it's structured a little, so it's structured for sort of like Wei and I to go back and forth. So we could do it that way, or I can just like jump to the other sections, or
go ahead. Maybe show us how you prepare it.
Okay. This is just based on what we extracted from the email exchanges, but okay.
Nice.
So we're gonna do some brief introductions and then back and forth and then questions, basically. So we can go through our like quick notes and then open it up. So the who we are is just, brief introduction. So Wei.
Yeah, I'm currently at Georgia Tech, and my research group does NLP research and some more and more interdisciplinary applications. So these are my wonderful students. I guess maybe nice guys. The current focus of my group are, besides the interdisciplinary aspect of handling like social media analysis, accessibility of the text, and privacy preservation. We also care about a lot about the fairness or multilingual, cross-lingual capabilities of large language models, a lot of testing of robotics and temporal shift. Other part of my research group are really into the text generation, so generative AI, the quality of it and how to evaluate it, how to kind of personalize it to meet everybody's styles. So that's a very quick introduction. I guess we are here to give advice other than just talking about ourselves. So if you want to learn more, of course, you can find our website.
I think don't hesitate to reach out because we'll also have PhD application season coming up. Yeah, but just for reference.
And then I'm Shane Steinert-Threlkeld. I'm an assistant professor in the linguistics department at the University of Washington. My lab is called CLIMBER, which is Computation, Language, and Meaning Band of Researchers, which, I was very proud to make that acronym up. I didn't have enough time to get the beautiful pictures of all my students as Wei did, but if you go to the website, they're all there. JD is our research assistant. We mainly work at the intersection of cognitive science and NLP. So doing a lot of using tools and techniques from NLP to learn more about how humans process language. And then in the other direction, taking insights from what we know about the cognitive science of language and using them to either analyze models or hopefully build better ones and better data sets. And then sort of particular areas that we work on are semantic topology, multilingual NLP, emergent communication, and lots of things in the interpretability and analysis space. And then I put the ... because as PhD students were just mentioned, lots of bottom-up research as well. So whatever the students want to do, I'm very excited to help guide. Wei is first.
All right. I really like the kind of the title for this mentor session is when have this part not only how to do a literature review, but when to stop. I think it's really up to kind of what's your purpose of doing literature review? Do you want to learn about a new topic? Or do you want to actually not only learn new topics, but try to decide what kind of topic you're going to work on? And of course, more extensively, you're actually going to do a series survey to write a survey paper. That's normally meaning if you want to write a survey paper, you probably need to read more like 50 or 100 papers, I would say that range. But if you're just like trying to learn a kind of a topic, depend on the kind of breadth of the topic, that I think on a little bit more narrowed down topic, I think 20, I think 20 to 50 would be pretty sufficient. You don't have to read everything about it. Let's come to a little bit tips. I felt like you want to not kind of read only broadly, you want to quickly kind of narrow down a little bit of what you're really kind of interested in, and try to kind of read more like a targeted topics other than just keep reading on everything coming out in the conference or the archives. You may feel like a little bit overwhelmed. So I think narrow down is a good idea. Another thing is like depends on your career stage. If you have already had a lot of experience, you have better judgment of the quality of the paper, then you can just read broadly, including the paper posted on archive, which is now peer reviewed. So you have to have a little bit kind of idea about the quality and the significance of the work. If you had the less experience of making that judgment, I would say start with the main conference papers in this kind of top NLP AI conferences would be a good place. Normally what really helps is that during your reading this maybe 20 or so paper, is to identify one to three very key paper on the main line of research as best as you can. This is also like those papers often written pretty well by very skilled researchers. That meaning they often give you a very good kind of summary of not only in the related work section, but sometimes in the entire paper will give you a very good broad view of the field and what are the other key papers.
There we go.
Yeah, want to leave share some time, but if you are interested, we can share this link with you. So it's coming down how to read a paper. It's like you probably reading a paper take a long time. I would say somewhere between reading a paper can be somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes to 3 days. I would say that's like reading one paper, depending on what that paper is. So you want to kind of develop this a little bit kind of taste or strategy of how to skim the paper, how to identify which paper is more likely worth more time to study. And for those very key and important papers that you may want to actually read a couple of other papers related to this in order to fully understand the extent of it. There's a case study. I guess Michael Oana is actually here. As his study is actually, Michael was an undergraduate student in my group. As part of the undergraduate thesis, Georgia Tech actually requires students to start with a little bit literature review. And then we just started to basically work. We saw the text simplification, one of the generation tasks, become more and more popular. And then we just are curious how many languages, how many kind of data are existing already there. So that's what he set out to do, and ended up he found just dig out every single paper he can find in the Google Scholar and narrow down about 30 resources. So we not ended up only writing a survey paper, but rather we write a pretty interesting data set combined analysis paper to kind of make all these resources easy for people to do. And Michael read all the kind of the data loader to make it into the uniform formatting and very easy to run experiment on. And he conducted a series of experiments just like what if you combine them all the data together, would that help? And what language family will be better for transfer learning, right? Transfer learning meaning you train on one language but make it work on the other because of the multilingual large language capabilities. So he not only published a paper but also won a best paper award, honorable mention, which is not that easy for undergraduate to do. And more impressively, and during the process, we figured we actually want to analyze the readability level of like how hard these texts are there in text, and we realized existing ones people have done this for English, but it's kind of the multilingual side is very kind of not very well developed. So we together with my PhD student Tarek, we wrote another paper on that. So this will be a very of the successful way to do a survey, I would say. So hopefully that inspires you to conduct your own survey, especially if you are like haven't written a paper yet, but it's going to be your first paper. It's a good starting point.
Just curious, a little question about sharing the progress. It's very impressive to see an undergrad student doing all of these, and then it feels really like yeah, very interesting. And then like, do you know roughly like how much time did a student start off and then did all these readings? Is it like several reading per week for several weeks, or all at once very intensively, or?
Michael has the best
actually.
question.
Yeah, we have this.
So I could speak to this a little bit. I started this project probably a whole year before it got published because I was really trying to do an extensive literature review. And I'd say my routine really was collecting the papers and doing maybe one kind of deeper reading per week. But I guess the first draft of the paper was as a survey paper instead of this data set paper. So at that point, I was doing, probably when I was writing that, I was reading maybe 3 papers a week as I was doing the writing. And then once we decided to switch it to more of like a data collection thing, I had already kind of done that reading up front. I guess, I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, like 1 to 3 papers a week for like a couple of months, basically.
Nice efforts. Thanks again for sharing. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and congrats again, as also in the Zoom comments said. Yeah, really nice achievement.
Thank you.
Great. We can pass the stage to Shane.
Hey, yeah, nothing so exciting to share, unfortunately, but I'll echo a lot of what Wei said and maybe add a few new points here and there. And I broke mine into thinking about literature review broadly from finding papers, reading papers, and then writing papers. And so on the finding papers, how to find them and not get overwhelmed and whatnot. I was trying to think about it in terms of a trade-off we all are familiar with between exploration and exploitation. And as Wei just mentioned, both of these things should still be done with a purpose. So even when you're like exploring a literature and just trying to like sort of find new papers and new stimulus, you should still be doing it with a purpose, with a goal in mind. So maybe that is to write a literature review or to hone in on some specific topic. And so I thought what was going to be a hot take, but has already been expressed, is that there's no point in trying to quote unquote keep up with the literature or with the field. It's just not possible. And so you shouldn't try. As a thing I believe. One should not just go to archive.cs.cl every day or every week and just try to sort of consume what's happening and get the finger on the pulse that way. It's not possible anymore and not productive. But if you approach the sort of literature in general with a purpose in mind, that helps you see what's relevant to you and what's not relevant to you. And I think of that phase when you're doing exploration as sort of trying to develop a mental landscape of an area that you're interested in. So maybe it's a task like machine translation and you want to know what are the different kinds of approaches, what are the different kinds of data. And then when you're exploring papers and whatnot, you can start to say like, oh, this is where there's a bunch of papers about low resource languages. This is a bunch of modeling papers, and sort of planting flag posts so you know where you can go look if you need to sort of dig deeper. And then the exploitation phase is, once things are more concrete, you're working on an explicit research project, and then you need to approach papers and subliteratures to go sort of deeper and actually figure out much more concretely what's going on. Just a few tools on where to find papers, so both Google Scholar and Semantic Scholar. Social media, when it's from sort of reputable people, as more money is flowing into our field, there are more people who are posting things that are not always, not even necessarily peer reviewed, but you don't always know what you're getting. So be a little careful. Archive Sanity is a tool that is sort of like filters archive for you based on semantic similarity of papers with a sort of crude measure. So based on things that you're interested in, and that can help a little bit. It's similar to the Semantic Scholar, has a related paper sort of thing. And definitely just following the citation trail in both directions. So part of the exploitation when you need to dig deeper, as Wei also mentioned, is following up, and you might wind up having 5 new papers that you need to read because they were cited as like key pieces of that other paper that you need to figure out about. But also going the other direction. So if you find a paper that really inspires you, look at what else is citing that paper. So go to, Google Scholar has cited by, Semantic Scholar has cited by, and see what other people are talking about it. And that's a great way to sort of see what kind of impact the paper has had. Put it in broader context. Reading papers. This is also came up a lot in Wei's comments. I think papers are like onions, just like ogres. So they have layers and layers of sort of depth. And when you're at sort of different stages in the process, you peel back different layers of the paper. And so when it comes to reading, there's another sort of way that a lot of people tend to approach papers, which is like, I'm going to sit down, have a nice cup of coffee, I'm going to open my paper and just read it from start to finish, line by line. And my goal is to understand everything that happens in this paper. And that's also sort of a recipe for failure because papers are hard and complicated, and the people who wrote them have been working on the topic for years or decades, and you're coming at it fresh. And so the better thing to do is to make passes through it and sort of get a surface level understanding of what's happening. So maybe you know sort of broadly the area it's contributing to, and then you sort of keep peeling back the layers of depth in the paper as needed for your purposes. So then if it turns out that you're going to do a research project that is extending an approach from a given paper, well, then you go in and really like read the method section deeply to figure out what actually happened. If it's a paper where you're comparing your method to something that's developed in this paper, you need to look at the results pretty closely to make sure that your comparisons are actually done in a fair way, for instance. But you sort of don't necessarily need to go into the sort of depths of a paper until you need to, basically. And then it can still be done in sort of a progressive and iterative way. And I also think about this as a way of sort of knowing when to stop. So if you think about like, you're in the middle of a project and you're going to write the paper, like, is it directly useful to what you're doing? And are you planning to cite it? Do you need to discuss it when you're writing your paper? Is it necessary for you to execute your project? That's a good way of sort of trying to figure out when things are, no longer relevant. Because at some point you do have to, my advisor told me that you have to have a certain amount of willful ignorance or else you'll never do anything. And so this is one way of getting a filter in there. Okay, and then just for writing papers, this again is like not general writing advice, just thinking about lit review and citations and things like that. Also came up in Wei's comments, cite published versions of papers if they exist. So even if you find something on archive, try to follow up and see if it's been published somewhere by looking at Google Scholar or Semantic Scholar or the CVs of the authors, but always cite published versions. I do recommend like using a reference manager. So Zotero is a popular one that I use. This is a way of just keeping track of all the papers you've been gathering and reading. You can organize them either by topic or by project and mix and match those things. It will also, keep track of your PDFs for you and generate BibTeX automatically, which is really useful. And I mean, ACL Anthology has great BibTeX, so it's not so bad to just go on ACL Anthology and copy it, but it's good to sort of have your own sort of repository of all of that information. In general, be generous with citations when you're writing. Like if you know about something that is relevant, don't be afraid to cite it. Like we're all trying to do the same thing and work towards the same goals. So be generous. And then when I think about writing related work and talking about relevant literature, the main question is always like, how is the work you're discussing relevant to the story that you're telling in your research. And so the lit review does not need to be like a complete summary of everything that happens in the work you're citing. It needs to be what's the core idea of this paper in the context of what you're doing and how is it connected. And so that's a way of sort of controlling how deep to go when you're discussing other work in the related work section. And yeah, it can always be helpful to break into, subtopics, whether it's about data or models or anything like that. It's a sort of helpful organizational tool as well. Okay, just a few quick thoughts, but yeah, happy for any questions and things like that.
Great, thank you for the super nice deck of slides. Very impressed. Yes, so we'll start with maybe some, I think me and Oana will alternate to ask questions. So give an example. For example, the top voted one is about ACL anthology is not friendly for advanced search. What type of keyword logics or advanced search setup is recommended for searching using Google Scholar?
Yeah, I guess, does Google Scholar have, so I mean, on regular Google, you can always do cite ACL anthology, like cite:/aclanthology.org to look for pages that are explicitly, then you get some of Google's query processing and indexing, and but only links to ACL anthology.
Yeah, I just do normal keyword search on ACL ontology, Google Scholar, and archive. I guess I don't really want very high precision. I like randomness. I like sampling. So that's yeah. I wouldn't mind to scrolling down 10 pages of the search result, or if not more than that.
Got you, cool. I also recently got a little bit challenging experience in that I'm trying to publish at a non-NLP venue, and then searching about interdisciplinary literature is such a new world.
Yeah, which kind of subfield are you trying to connect to? Oh, that was a question for you. Like, which kind of other fields are you trying to connect with?
Oh, I'm trying to connect with political science a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
It has to go through some human in the route, asking like how they do search, what journals they look at, and then search. Yeah.
Exactly. Are these reputable ones or not? And
yes. Or find one very reputable one, then do breadth search for all the papers it cited, and then grow the tree.
Yeah.
Okay. I can move on to the next question, the most voted one, or the second most voted. So how could we make sure that we are reviewing enough papers for the literature review?
Yeah, that's come down to, actually felt like people might be more creative and more brave if they know less. So you can do an early stalking, I guess, depends on the topics. Yeah, I think some certain topics, for example, the case study I showed, like multilingual text simplification, you probably want to do an exhaustive search to make sure there no one else is already wrote a review or wrote something very relevant, right? But for some other topics, for example, buyers, some of those there are numerous papers. So you want to kind of get a rough idea what's going on, but at the same time, you want to formulate your idea probably before you do an exhaustive search. So that meaning it's not reading 50 or 80 papers discourage you from thinking about it, because you will feel overwhelmed and it's hard to get a new idea. But your idea potentially is new, so you may want to work on the idea first and then go check whether people have done something very close or not. And some other newer area like a large language model and like instruction tuning, in those cases, you probably want to do a very exhaustive search on archive because those are contested areas. So if you're not the first or close to be the first one, if you're too late, then those are the kind of type of work only the early ones would sustain, or like unless you have a different idea. So those are low-hanging fruit. That meaning if you're not there yet, first, they are no longer your low-hanging fruit, but others.
Yeah, and I think that's a good sort of like when you're doing a PhD, and like thinking about what kinds of research questions to pursue and to ask. I think it's good to try to find questions that other people are likely not going to be working on. I tend to think it's rare to be sort of exactly scooped. So like whatever you are working on, probably no one is doing exactly the same thing you are. And so, you know, if you're working in an area where other people are working, that means there's going to be an audience for your research. But if you do something that is sort of extremely low-hanging fruit, odds are other people are thinking about it. And so it's good to sort of think about what you're uniquely positioned to do based on your background and your interests, and really pursue that as opposed to what sort of everyone might be thinking about. Yeah, and then the other thing I was thinking in terms of Wei's comment about sort of working and then searching later is also when you're writing your paper, there's a good mental switch that one can make where instead of thinking of yourself as a defendant, where your goal is to like defend your research from all possible attacks, what you actually are is like an advocate, and you're trying to sell your project in like the best way you can think of and in the most positive light. And then if you're sort of just trying to advocate for why you did what you did, you still need to go through the literature to explain why it's a contribution, why it's making pushing the literature forward in a certain area, but you don't necessarily have to say like every possible thing that's connected, why it's distinguished from that. And it can be a sort of liberating like mental switch to flip.
Great, thanks a lot for the suggestion. And the next question we'll go to is calling the papers is calling the paper a survey or review downvalue the work? I saw people would frame their work as opinion or theoretical contribution rather than a survey.
I love survey papers. I'm one person, so I was thinking about that when Wei was mentioning finding like 1 to 3 sort of key papers, which maybe like when you are approaching a new literature in a new subfield and you find a really good survey paper, it's so exciting and like such a breath of fresh air. And yeah, and so I mean, another way of thinking about it is like you do have to do literature review for your dissertation or for your thesis or for whatever project, and it's another way of like turning that into a research contribution instead of just a related work section. And if you write a literature review that really like gives you a taxonomy of how to think about the literature, like there's these axes of variation in the subfield, and these papers are about this axis, these papers are about this axis, like that's, I don't know, it's so valuable. I don't know, but I'm one person.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think I would say in any categorizations like survey papers or opinion papers, depend on the content of it, and also depend on what kind of researchers or what kind of reputation you want to earn yourself. You should not write papers because not only how you want other people to see you, you want to work on something you're passionate about. I guess you feel your self-fulfillment probably more than important than anything else. So that determines you choose to write an opinion same paper versus like a survey paper, or versus none of the above but other type of papers.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, I feel like both reading survey papers and writing survey papers is a very good practice. I remember I did my first survey like thing maybe 2 years after I started individual projects and so on. And I feel like it's that moment when you get a concrete idea of what is innovation. like because you see all the difference set between the general cluster of papers and then this new paper, and then you see what axes do they vary. And then you also get this data-driven feeling of what is a bigger innovation and what is a more incremental thing. So I think that's very like eye-opening in that stage.
Yeah. Even for that, I think survey paper and opinion paper in their own category, there are better ones and there are not that great ones, right? So, yeah. So it's not like the type of paper determined it, but rather how good it is itself determined.
True. And in case people need some suggestions, I think the theme track of the ACL series of conferences are more and more welcoming these. And also, I think computational linguistics as a journal welcome if you have, let's say, 40-page long survey. Whereas if you have 8-page long, 10-page long things, then you can try TACL, TACL as a journal. Yeah, but up to your choices.
Yeah, I also wanted to say I really like survey papers and they're really helpful. And I think especially when I'm starting a new subject or a new topic, that's the first papers I try to look for, and then definitely I cite them because they're really helpful. And yeah, thank you so much for your answers. We can move on to the next question. So it is, what categories do you recommend for taking notes while doing a literature review? Examples like contributions, motivation, methodology.
Yeah, I think those are all good categories. I mean, yeah, I would be sort of lying if I said I have this list of like 12 categories that I take that I like apply to every paper as I read it. So, I think like, yeah, what's the nature of the contribution? So is it a theoretical position paper? Is it a, new modeling decision? Is it a resource paper? Those are really good ones. Quick 1 or 2 sentence, like a summary of what the main contribution is. And so like one way I often think about notes, which can then become very helpful for like writing the related work, is like taking a few bullet points about just like the key thoughts that occur to me while I'm reading it, because I'm reading it like for a purpose, as was mentioned earlier. So like what's connecting with the purpose that I'm reading this paper, and then basically trying to write a short little like a new abstract for the paper. That's sort of like your personal abstract. That's why it's relevant for you. Is sort of the way I think about trying to like filter the signal.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit depends on the purpose of your survey, reading the paper and surveying the paper. I guess are you trying to write a related work thing, or are you just trying to find a gap in the current research in order to create a idea for your new project? Yeah, I think I kind of, if I'm writing more like a related work type of thing, I normally have kind of a Google Doc, more like a sketchbooks type of thing. I just like write some note and also some links to the paper, because not all the link is ACL ontology, so some are a little bit complex to figure out basically the title, author, and things, and the venue they published, and those kind of things, and also like a few sentences, and some of them are including my judgment about their quality and like what's the methodology or like data set. So it's pretty short summary, I would say, similar to Shan mentioned, probably no more, definitely not like a full entire paragraph, but more like a couple of sentences or 3 or something like that. And I do take some screenshot of the paper and put together in this sketchbook. So which kind of the key part I figured out of the paper, or some illustration helped me to quickly recall my memory about that paper and things like that. So or the like some important sentences in the paper, I will not just put them in a PDF file. That I mean, there's too many papers I read, so I'm not going to find it again in the PDF file. So I would take a screenshot and put together into this Google Doc sketchbook type of thing.
Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. And I also feel like we do have different levels of memories. Like I try to usually draw analogies to operating system class, where we know that the most important things are in the cache. Then next we have RAM. So cache is smallest, but you use it really often. And then you have RAM, which is also a limited size, and then you query that more often. Then for things that are really too large, you put that into the external memory thing, hard drive, and so on. So I believe that's like pages and pages of notes or Zotero and things sound like the external memory thing. And then maybe for people or maybe it's later when people accumulate more intuitions, then things stay in your RAM or cache are the main spirit for this field of research. It could also be similar to how usually an invited talk is structured. Like they distill, oh, what this field is lacking, and then what are some existing common trends. And also with regard to this question in the parentheses, like if people are interested in the method related thing, usually the computational or technical method, at least the several nearest neighbors should be very, should be in the RAM of your memory. And then you should be very fluent with how they do it and then how I want to propose my new thing. Yeah, just some potential thoughts. Great. And then the next question we will get into is any tips for balancing the need to be authoritative or comprehensive or original while managing scope and length? This is the big thing I struggle with in my reviews.
I guess coming back to one of the things I was saying in one of my bullets is that like being authoritative doesn't mean being exhaustive or thorough. So if you're writing a paper, like if you can say, oh, this other paper tried this approach and it didn't work because of reason X, and so we have swapped out X and are trying Y. Like that's two very short sentences that is like as much detail as you need for a given paper, and that sort of conveys that you've like distilled the essence out. And that, you sort of demonstrated authority by like extracting that essence, as opposed to having demonstrated authority by like writing 3 paragraphs about that paper. So that's sort of one dimension of it. And just trust yourself when you have done a fairly thorough literature review. At some point you just have to believe that you do have an original idea, and trust yourself that you've done a proper and thorough literature review. And it's fine also at some point, like the reviewers will tell you if you've missed something when you submit something, right? Like that's how science proceeds, and every single paper is like, oh, please also cite this other thing. Oh, didn't know about that, and now you get to learn about it. That's almost like another way of finding new papers is having reviewers tell you that you should have cited something. And that's like nothing to be ashamed of. That's just how we're all limited beings, and that's how science goes.
Yeah, I would assume that you are saying you're trying to write a survey paper. I think if you want to write a survey paper, you want to be as comprehensive as you can, but that doesn't mean you want to distribute your space of the paper to every paper like uniformly. You want to highlight the most important key work and the high quality or pioneer work. But others you may want to just make sure you actually read them, but you don't necessarily using even like a sentence to describe it. You can just like have a citation, like some sentence, that one sentence that like 5 papers, those type of things. So you want to kind of not evenly distribute. Of course, depend on the type of things what you're surveying. And then if you just want to write a literature review more for like your paper or like a thesis or type of thing, which is meaning that's shorter, then you don't need to be even that comprehensive in the way that in terms of your writing. So you should try to maybe read broadly to give other related work one thing is to give credit to that, and another thing put your work into the context of as an ongoing research discussion with this work. And others is like you may have a unique viewpoint that demonstrates your expertise. You say the word, how you say the word, right? So it's not like it's just a mere list of existing work, but it's more like a reasoning behind it and how they connect each other or intellectually connect to each other. Even the terminology used in this paper are vastly different, or one thing is adapting type of method, and then others are model editing, how you connect these two seemingly like unrelated kind of topic to actually intellectually very related. So those are the interesting way to write a related work other than just being a description, I guess. You more like just what your thought process. Demonstrate you're not only know about the work, but you're a deep thinker of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, the way I think about it, about the related work section is like a story. So in the initial drafts, it's okay to just list the papers, but then you want to connect them some way, right? Like to have a story, to have consistency, and yeah, thinking deeply about the papers that you include in the related work is part of that. And yeah. Okay, we can move on to the next question. How to keep up with concurrent work and when to stop looking for it. In many areas of NLP, it's hard to follow all the papers that can potentially scoop you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
I mean,
this is a new challenge. Yeah, Shan, you go ahead.
No, I don't have super deep thoughts. It is a challenge, and the pace is increasing a bit in a way that I hope we can start to like resist a little bit as well. Like we shouldn't be producing as many papers as we are, to be honest. But so one thing that also came up in the chat here was about feeds on Semantic Scholar, where you can sort of organize some papers into a topic, and then it will give you an email every couple of days with new papers in that area. And so that way you're getting like organized new papers that they find that are similar to the other ones that you're looking at. That actually can be a really helpful. I have a few feeds that are sort of for fairly specific topics, and it surfaces new papers that way. Definitely. I also mentioned in the chat having feeds and notification space in particular authors. So when you're sort of becoming more advanced in your projects and really starting to contribute to a very specific area, you'll start to know who the people are that are working on similar topics, and you can basically follow those people on social media, on archive, on their websites, and see what they're doing and see what they're talking about. And that's a helpful way. And it has happened a few times where while we've basically had concurrent submissions of very similar ideas, and like while your paper is under review, a very similar paper gets posted to archive or is under review at the same conference. Like this happens all the time. And the other, reviewers can't criticize you for work that came out while your thing is under review, right? You've already submitted, your job is done, and that's something that you can have a discussion with the reviewers and the area chairs in the sort of conference review process, that like if something was genuinely concurrent, it's okay that you didn't cite it because you had to submit the paper. So don't be afraid to also stand up for yourself in that context.
I think that's one of the reasons why they invented archive. So, so
yeah.
But at the same time, that's speeding up things more, and then more likely to get scooped. so, so it's ironic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's used to be not a problem that easily to get ideas scooped, but I noticed, and I also noticed many cases and heard from others, and this has happened more often now, just given the field is converging to some extent, right? Because everyone will have to use all these certain large language models, and unless you work on certain topic, you don't need to, but otherwise that's restricted certain things you can do with each type of the model, right? So I think you shall have a little bit estimation of how hot the area you're working on, and the topic of what you're doing is the natural idea everyone will think about, or this is something a little bit unique to your own thought process. So you have a little bit estimation of the how likely the risk would be. And of course, given your own speed and resources you have and capability, you shall cannot choose a topic that's best protected for yourself, and in certain cases, it's like high risk, high reward at the same time. So that's the risk just people committed to take, right? So I think that's probably the case. And I agree with Sean said concurrent work can be both published if they are not too far apart from each other, or they have made somewhat different contributions. Some natural idea, I mean, is too similar to each other, but some other cases, I think actually even you work on very similar things, that they will have differences that's sufficient enough to sustain both work being published. So again, it just estimates what's the case is yours, and then to decide how closely you monitor the new paper coming out, I guess. And for some situation, unless you're working on super high risk type of thing, maybe keep yourself away from archive and Twitter, maybe may keep you sane and more productive.
Definitely.
Yeah, I really love the suggestions. Yeah,
I do think it's really rare to be like genuinely scooped. It does happen, and so I don't mean to discourage it, but as Wei just mentioned, I want to reiterate, like, there's always genuine scoops can happen, and they do happen, but I think it is very helpful to think like, if you're working in an area that other people are working in, that means other people will be excited about what you're doing, and as long as what you're doing is unique in some way, that means you have an audience for your project, and the odds of like a 100% scoop are quite low, to be honest. It does happen, but yeah.
Yeah, even occasionally happen that similar enough. It's just meaning that you may need to add 2 or 3 more weeks of work to compare to that.
Yeah, exactly.
So some extra work, that doesn't mean you can't publish your work.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree. Read that issue. I think there could be several scenarios that are a little bit close to each other. One is totally you're scooped. And then the other is it's a nearest neighbor enough paper so that the reviewers keep talking about that when they comment on the contribution of your paper. Yeah. And then some of the recent cases I have been through is that the competitive one is from an industry lab, and the number of experiments is 5 times as our experiment. So the reviewer basically hold the stand that, oh, this paper like outcasts you, and then what's the remaining value of your paper? I think at that moment, I start to think more deeply about this like scooped problem. First is that like, I guess like framing our unique, taking the difference, framing the unique contribution is one side. And the other side is also about like, for academics, if we imagine we're back to undergraduate time, all the, let's say, calculus questions we solved, somebody has already solved that before, but like still treating that as a novel problem, and we as the first time solver help us to grow as a researcher as well. So sometimes, and also like even if people later go to industry, they grew their expertise in academia. So it's nice to like protect the nice greenhouse for academic people so that we have space to grow and take our time to do the thing we want to try. Yeah, so this is some of the thoughts. And then, yeah, the other little thing might be that I think we were also discussing this also with Radha and a few others, that if we follow this latest research trend and they're not peer reviewed yet, then gradually the imbalance or the fairness problem will stand out in that places with stronger PR machine will take the main trend more. And then if you're from an unknown university and it's your first research, it'll be a little bit more challenging compared to the stage where we're more slow paced. So I guess there will be a little thing that we need to help as well.
I guess having the social media also gives some more famous places some advantage. Of course, the industry has bigger PR, but at the same time, it's also somewhat of a fair. I think archive is partially created for the fairness reasons. It's basically you do not have to be held accountable for the peer. Basically, the peer review cannot block your work to be out. So I do think there are less known research labs into the country that there are only one single NLP labs, but they stand out because they continuously publish good quality work. So I do follow them, or I know of them. So I think your work eventually will speak for yourself. You may need a series of work. So.
And
yes.
When I had the bullet point about being generous with citations, this is also part of what I had in mind was like, you know, sure, lots of media attention gets captured just by the PR firms of companies and whatnot, but we're all researchers, and part of what our responsibility is to like understand the field as a whole and what people have been doing. And so if in your lit review, you uncover a paper that is sort of underappreciated and undercited, like you can start citing it and making people more aware of it. And one of the roles that we play as the research community is to push back against the just pure PR side of things.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Actually, you know, Google Scholar and some of the other surveys, they will send so that you've set the papers, right? So they will send to actually a notification to the authors of the paper you set periodically, if you have that notification turned on. So I do discover papers from time to time from some papers cited our work and from some labs and I don't know about before. And then, oh, okay, you start also work on this. Good for you. I'm very happy about it, and of course. So yeah. So citation is both ways.
Yeah, I totally get you. And then also at conferences or other meetup, it's nice to meet with people who cite you and who you cite. So yeah. Oh, another little thing I think we didn't mention, but some of the students actually track GitHub, and then they get the repo with a lot of stars, and usually they're pretty good in a democratic way. Yeah, also in this era of LLMs and then more software is being opened up. Great, awesome. With this, I think we're good. We could end with some open-ended comments or wishes for the students.
No specific comment here. Thanks for, I don't know if you're asking them to comment or asking us to comment, but thanks guys. This was a really useful session.
Thank you so much for coming by, and wish everyone good luck with their first, second, and then ends paper. Awesome. Thank you so much, Wei, Shane, and Oana.
Thanks everyone, and thanks for organizing. I just put my email in the chat if anyone ever wants to reach out, feel free.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and nice to see you guys, and thank you for organizing this. It's so awesome. I'm glad you keep doing this.
Yeah, it's a
and
great
organizing
initiative.
this.
Yeah,
Thank
that's a
you
great
so much.
initiative.
Bye.